So, welcome everyone. It's January 30th, 2025. Almost an entire month has gone. Can you believe it? We've just been dealing with record breaking cold weather. We've had the inauguration month and just political saturation of the best order as of now. And so, it's just been an awesome start to 2025. It's been a very difficult start concerning the weather and everything. And so, anyway, I just want to introduce you guys to my really dear friend, Jim Rudolph here. Jim, how long have we known each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. It seems like I've known you since forever, but I guess you'd say it's been about a little over 10 years. Because when I bought my house is when I met you that day.
Exactly. Yeah, we met in 2011, so it's been like 14 or 15 years.
Yeah, it would be over 10 years. Yep.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and it was like we hit it off the minute we met. So it was a God thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jim has been an inspiration to me. He's helped me a lot. Jim, tell us what you do for work.
Yep. I'm a business owner. I guess you'd call me an entrepreneur. Right out of the gate, I did a paper route as a child. So I ran around commission based. The paper route, they try to get you to go around knocking on doors and get customers for the paper route. Oh. So there I am, a whole, 10 years old, running around the neighborhood, drumming up an income, and my mother had 9 kids. So I'm one of the older ones, so I can change a diaper real fast, and I'm pretty good at making money, at least have a good work ethic. I always feel like I can make more money, than what I do. But
I've known you all this time, and I don't think you've ever told me you had 8 siblings.
I did. I have 5 brothers. 4 brothers. There's 5 men in my family. There's 4 brothers, 4 girls, 4 sisters. So me and Joshua, we talk psychological stuff a lot, and it's because we both come from a big family, and you got to learn a little psychology, or you don't survive. You're dealing with all those siblings kind of crammed in a small house.
Wow.
So low income family growing up, I guess you'd say, and we had some government assistance. And when I went to school, public school, big school, competitive. Government cheese, and then when they made kind of a spectacle out of me going through the lunch line every day, they would take this card out. They'd have, these index cards, and my name would be on there. They'd take it out and use a little puncher in front of everyone, the cute girls and all that. I was just terrified. I went without eating most of the time. I just felt like, wow. When you're young, I mean, that stuff is just, it's huge,
Right.
So, yeah, good
stuff.
So,
so I come from a large family as well. I have, it's 8 of us all together. So he's got 9 and I have 8. So we're kind of similar in that manner. I'm a middle child. And so anyway, how did we meet? So what brought us together?
Yeah. I was right there where your business is. I was buying a piece of property next door, and you were kind of swinging at it, I think. I think you were thinking about maybe hitting it, getting that piece of property. And
so we kind of got off on a bitter start. Like, we were kind of rivals at first. And so, I think that's what solidified us down the road. We've realized that we were very much like we were really seeking after the same thing at the same time in life. And so, it wasn't bitter. I just said it that way just because, it was kind of like this clash. I'm buying this property. No, you're buying it. And then he bought it before I did. And it was such a blessing that he did because, and we just became great friends after that.
Yeah.
I had met Jim.
Yeah.
I don't know, like 6 years prior to that. And so I knew of him, but I did not have a personal friendship with him.
Right. So. Yeah, I think we, even here in your position in the family, we have a lot of that in common. Right. So, but when I met you that day buying that house, I mean it's right next door to where your shop is now. So it would be a real good ideal place to be a little bit closer to, I guess, the traffic. And but you have a real eye for business. You've always had that, Joshua. And so you were seeing what I was seeing. I could see Harmony Road, and I could see the traffic, and just thought, hey, this would be a good property with a good return down the road. So I bought it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Jim is he does landscape work, and so I've done some of his landscape repair work, doing mechanical and electrical repair work, and so Jim's a very busy man these days. He sometimes employs different people to kind of help him work around the Lake Oconee area, and so he's one of these blue collar guys who gets things done, and at the same time keeps God first. And so I just want to talk to Jim. Well, Jim, tell us how old you are. You don't really have to give us an exact age, but I think
Okay.
for an audience, it might be all.
Well, let's back up because, I mean, I didn't plan this, but in the back of my mind, I wanted to say what I'll say. I'll say it on the air. I have a customer that you gave me, Keith Munger. If you remember him, he was one of your customers, and you promoted me to him. This would have been, I mean, maybe 7, 8 years ago. And that has been a tremendous account. And that's this grading job I told you about,
Right.
that is the new owner of that property.
Oh.
And so thank you. I mean, you really need a honey baked ham for Christmas this year because you really blessed me. And don't think I didn't think of that. When I'm out, that'll come across my mind. I'm like, Jeshua, and I told my wife, I said, Jeshua got me this job. And this job has really been blessing us through the years. I mean, through the years, it has been an amazing account just because you handed my name out. So on the air, thank you. I mean, here's a 2025 January thank you in the new year. And so that box is checked, as I wanted to tell you that.
Right.
And so I'll tell you right now. But anyway, I'm 57. Right now, I'm growing up.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the reason I bring his age in there is simply because I really think it's really important in life to have people in a slightly older age group than you, or in a similar age group. And I know a lot of people don't really have someone's, somewhat the same season. I'm in my 40s. He's in his 50s, and so he's always been like someone who was not so much ahead of me in life that I could still kind of relate to him, but he was older than me to where I could receive advice from him. And so he's helped me in so many ways. He's been my accountability partner, and I've expressed, a lot of the conflicts and some of the rational decisions I want to make. I've kind of run them through him, and he's kind of done the same with me. So I think that we're kind of close enough in age. I think he benefits me more than I do him, just simply because of the age disparity. But it's just awesome to have someone who's in the same locale as me. He's not in the same business, but in a similar industry. And so, he's really been very, very helpful. And so I kind of just want to go back to like 2024. 2024 was just like, I don't know, it's just this incredible year where so many things happen, so much is going on. And so I just want to ask Jim, like, what were some ways you were blessed in 2024? In what ways did you see God's blessing in your life, or maybe in other people's lives? Kind of give us like the positive of 2024.
Okay, I'm 57, and I've been a guy who would get out and try to move a mountain every day in my business. I mean, I'm a landscaper and literally moving dirt, and today I was in the dirt. I mean, I actually had some painting. I got some paint on me, but the painting, I mean, that's not normal. I'm moving the dirt, turning the soil, and so anyway, 24. My whole life I've been basically just get up, get out the end of the driveway, make a living, try to do a little better than that. But, and 24 was better than that. I made a profit, Joshua. I had some mentors years ago say, never work for your bills. Y'all might write this one down and write it on your memory. I mean, never work for your bills, they said. These were some very successful men that cared about me. Because if you do, you just, that may be what you get. And if you're working all week and you pay Georgia Power, you gotta have a case of beer to go with that. You know what I mean?
I like that.
So they always shoot higher than that. You always shoot higher than your bills.
Right.
So in 24, I really did well. And when that storm came into Augusta, in the fall here, I mean, I went out there and it was a wild experience taking trees off in houses. And for the first time in my life, when they seen the landscaper show up, they were like, I mean, they said I was essential in coronavirus, but I mean, these folks were glad I was around. Yeah, I rolled in there with that skid steer, and you would have thought, I was handing out, diamonds to people. They were so excited I was there.
Right.
So yeah, the 24, I really was like fully alive, I guess I'd say. Fully alive. I mean, I really did so many things in my business, and I just thank God that I was able to be healthy. I had no major mistakes and no injuries, but really just going for it. 24 is fully alive. A lot of ministry stuff, and the 24 too, guys. I will say this: this is the year I did a lot what I'm doing right now. I kind of got to share with other people a lot, give away some of the stuff that I'd been given through the years on podcasts, and doing a lot of podcast stuff with some other friends, and my sons are in on that. And so I was able to sit behind the mic quite a bit in 24. And I think for me, that's a highlight, because I mean, I'm so used to just being in the grind that this is exciting to give something that comes out of my mind and then out of my mouth versus just using my brawn. And so, yeah, 24 podcast. And a lot of that. So I'm glad to be here tonight doing this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, 2024 was. I mean, I did a lot more travel in 2024 than I've ever done before, and so I would just say for me, I was blessed to do a variety of international trips, including going to Germany, Poland, France, Amsterdam. And then toward the end of the year, I did a trip to Johannesburg, Africa. And so I would kind of back up to like the Euro trip. I was really impressed with like the safety of Poland. I think what struck me was just how family oriented it was. I just realized,
All right.
it was a country that was oppressed both by Germany and by Russia. And so they were used to oppression. The oppression was nothing new to them. And I think that's why they've been hospitable to a lot of the Ukrainian refugees. And so I saw a number of marches out there for Ukrainian people. And so it was just, it was very serene just knowing that there was a war taking place just, a few hundred miles away from me, from where I was in Poland. And so, yeah, that was a really eye-opening trip. It was definitely one of the best trips I had. And so, but I think the family-oriented nature of Poland just made me realize that a lot of factors can be wrong in a society, but if the family structure stays strongly intact, it can withstand a lot of cultural toxicity. And this is just kind of because, in order for the family to stay intact, a number of God's 10 Commandments is required.
All right, let me stop you. What did you, when you were over in Poland and you said it was family-oriented, with the people out of Ukraine, did you tell me about that? I mean, did you experience some of that, like people from there, and what was that like? I mean, it's interesting, because I know Poland is right close by, and that's a real touchy thing. But tell me about Ukraine, because my experience with the Ukraine people here in America, it seemed like they were, a little harsh maybe, and maybe a little bit unethical, some of the people I knew. But you tell me, because I'm open to that.
Well, I didn't interact with a lot of Ukrainian people, but I did talk to one specific Ukrainian woman, and she was just kind of in tears, and she was like, I don't know what you're being told in America, but all of our men are dead, pretty much. She was like, I don't know of a woman that hasn't lost her husband, her brother, her father. So all of them were missing in war, and she was like, I think at the time she was like, you guys are being told that 400,000 of us have been killed in war. She's like, I think it's more like 1 million. So this is just coming from her. She was like, and it was just heartbreaking just hearing this. And so she was in Poland. She was set up at it's like a farmer's market kind of outlet. And so then anyway, the Polish people, it was just an incredibly safe city. They respected the police. Everybody was walking. Every husband was holding his wife's hand. Every boyfriend was holding his girlfriend's hand. And it was a very, very safe place well into the night. Like it was, everybody was with their family. And so they had a very high standard for cleanliness. The streets were clean. There was no homelessness. It was honestly the safest city I've ever been to. And so I just saw that reflected in their culture. And so I went down to like the river area. and I don't even know, it's like 100,000 people out on the street because it was the first warm day. It stays cold in Poland all the time, and it was like the first warm day of the year. Like I timed this trip just perfectly when it comes to the weather, and so there was so many people out on the street, and you didn't hear a voice. People were like quiet. It was like, I'm not used to how quiet it is. Like no loud music, no one screaming, no one shouting. And it was, I don't know, it's very surreal. So anyway, I just think that they were very, very strongly family oriented. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed that. And so I did go to Auschwitz and Birkenau, which was a concentration camp in Poland. And so, it was really, really odd for me to like walk into that concentration camp and just think about how many people were killed in this concentration camp. And I'm like, how did such an atrocity happen among such civilized people? And so, I think they kind of thought like us, like we have atrocities occurring today. And for the most part, people are like, I don't want to talk about it. It's going to be divisive. It's going to be political. And so there's so many atrocities that we just label as political, and so we don't talk about it. And so I think that's probably what they did. They obviously knew the concentration camps from Germany were actually put in Poland so that the general public wouldn't know about it, but eventually they did. And so it was just really hard to believe that something like this could happen among very civilized people. And so, yeah, it was.
So this is happening in 24. This just happened. When did you go on the trip?
In 2024, yeah. This was like
what month?
First part of the spring in April, and in March and April.
Okay. You help me with this, and I know a lot of your listeners probably know this saying, but there's a saying that goes, hard times make good people. Good people make good times make weak people.
So true.
And so that cycle, and I was thinking of some of those people that you were experiencing, they had been through hard times.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think you were experiencing. They became good people through the hard times. And that saying, a good sailor is not made on calm water.
Yeah.
So, so interesting that you're over there this past year experiencing some of that firsthand. That's you got your kind of your finger on the pulse.
Yeah, and then after that, I did an actual mission trip. When I went to Europe, that was just a solo trip and had some friends there. And so then I went to Africa with some of the church members, and I went to Johannesburg. And so I think for me, going to Africa just kind of made me realize it's almost like, not even politically correct to say it, it's like an unspeakable irony that the very atrocity of the transatlantic slave trade transplanted some of my ancestors here in America. And I benefit from that, from being in a country that I love. I would never want to live in Africa as of today. Okay. Even though this great atrocity happened in the past, I think the silver lining is so many people from Africa now are in America, and we're free. Like we're not in slavery. So, it was very heartbreaking just seeing so much of the living conditions there, and just the abject poverty and the uncleanliness and the lack of hygiene, and it was definitely a very tough place. And so we did street ministry, we did just about all the church, all the missionary type things you would expect on a mission trip. So it was a good trip. It was a 16-hour flight, but it was a really good trip. So
how many people were with you on that?
I think it was about 16 of us.
Okay.
So
wow, great. And where did you stay there?
We stayed at an Airbnb that was in Johannesburg, just outside the city.
Okay.
Like it was called a little city called Kayasand. So we were just outside of that, and it was good. So
well, I always have this thought every time I hear about the slavery days and all that in America. I have a thought that someone ran by me when I was younger, and that is, at the time when America was engaging in all that, the whole world engaged in it. It was a world, it was kind of, as humans were, the evolution of civilization, every country was doing this.
Right.
America was the first country to abolish it. It was the first country to go, hey, the whole world has just gotten to this, this practice, but we're going to stop it.
Right.
And I think that's instead of us looking at as a black eye, I think it's kind of a victory for America, that we did something about it.
Right.
And then like the rest of the world, they kind of follow along after that. So I just think that's amazing. But I don't belittle, I'm not belittling any of the suffering or any of the bad. Obviously, slavery would be bad no matter what, but it was a world practice all the way back to the beginning of time.
Right.
And the fact that America went to battle for that and won, and we don't have it today. Podcast sitting here with two guys I have color, we all have
Right.
color, but
Right.
but thank God, thank God that slavery's not, and there's so much back to political. There's so much ignorance, and a lot of the politicians are playing on a lot of ignorance, and they play on a lot of emotion, and that's how they keep their job.
Right.
Unfortunately, but we got to live with it. I tell people that every day. I talked to a guy today, a young man of color. I said, if we get along, politicians got to go get a job. But it was great, and I loved him. He held the door for me. This man of color, young man,
Right.
Great guy. He was another blue collar worker. Just enjoyed meeting him, and anyway, that was great.
So on a later podcast, we're going to actually talk a little bit about slavery, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but just talking about the mistreatment of people, particularly women, and just talking about how times were back then versus today. So just stay tuned to that. That's coming really soon. I'm working on it. So
Good.
Anyway, this year was just for me, like, undeniably just so much spiritual growth in my church community. Like, I feel like my church should be like a Christian pilgrimage destination, a tourist attraction. Like, so many young people growing in their faith due to the faithful preaching of the word there. And I always just say, like, the caliber of a father is often measured by the status of his children. What is his children like? And so it's sort of like that with a church. The spiritual health of a church is measured by the growth of the members. Say whatever you want about the leaders, but if the church body is growing, and I'm not talking about in numbers, but if it's growing in selfless, loving faith toward God and others, that's a commendable church. So that, I would say, that was probably the highlight of 2024 for me.
Really? Let me put this out there on the table. I've had trouble with the church since coronavirus. I have someone that pastored a church. I mean, I've been ordained and pastored a church, and I grew up in the church. And the coronavirus showed kind of people's true colors. And there is a scripture that says, if you try to save your life for your own sake, you'd lose it. But if you give up your life for Christ's sake, you gain it. And I felt like we shrunk Christ down, most of the churches did, below a germ. It's like smaller than a germ. And I just couldn't believe it. And I really, to this day, I would like the churches in America to go on to an apology tour, because there's so many people that feel like me. I'm a sold-out believer to this. I mean, I was someone... To this day, I don't miss church. I'll be there Sunday. But that really showed me something. It showed me that people were the propaganda was really affecting people.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that the church would, and I say this for this reason. We had an opportunity to lead the world. We had an opportunity there. Not if every pastor, if 90% of the pastors, 9 out of 10, said we're not going to close the doors, we could have really left a mark on the world for the church. And they were saying that the pastors were not essential, but the landscapers were. Yeah. And the bars were open and the churches were closed, and the riots were okay, and the church gatherings were not. And I could just see it almost like so calm, and so it's like right on the...
Right.
You know what I mean? And
yeah,
so,
there was a number of churches that closed. I guess the majority of them did. And so, but my church in Atlanta never closed during COVID. And so there was one week where my pastor himself was sick, and he was like, well, I can't preach this week. I'm sick, but I'll be back next. So there was like 1 week he didn't preach, but he stayed open, and that contributed to an influx of people. We kind of just absorbed a lot of the more evangelical members of surrounding churches, and that's where our church kind of grew from 250 in 2020 to, I think, over 2,000 now in 2025. So it was exponential growth, and it was because it was a time when people were searching for, in 2020, people were just kind of searching for meaning. They were trying to understand what was going on in the world, and so many people had been kind of running from God. Even I was kind of in this travel mode where the weekends was a time for me to go and sightsee and travel and just kind of run away from maybe reality. But then since travel was shut down and air traffic was shut down, it kind of forced people to kind of like reorient their lives and rethink about, what am I doing with my life? And so that drew some people who had a faith background to a church, and my church was there to welcome these people. And so it just kind of grew.
That's exactly my point. Every single church could have your experience. Everyone could have exponentially grown and brought in all the non-church people if we showed leadership. Right. And that was my point. And you're proving the point. Your church proves the point. And I felt like we dropped the ball there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I was a member of a Baptist church, and they were shutting down. And then if you do come, you can't worship, you can't sing. If you stand up, you got to put on a mask. Right. And I'm sorry, that was not okay. And they really, really were afraid. Right. They really were. And these are people I knew personally and know personally. And hey, grace is a word that I'm learning to go. At 25, we're getting to that. I don't want to get ahead, but I want to learn to be graceful.
Right.
But I pick my leaders a little careful these days.
Right.
but congratulations on your church. I mean, that is an amazing church down there. Yeah.
So for 2024, there was like a lot of challenges. I would say 2024 by far was not the easiest year nor the best year of my life. And so there was just so many challenges. And so, Jim, for you, what kind of challenges did you kind of encounter during 2024? What was if we kind of pull the rosy veil back and the smiles, and how are you doing? I'm doing fine versus how are you doing? How are you really doing? Like, tell us how you really are doing. Yeah. Like when we pull back that rosy veil, what were some challenges you were facing with, like mentally, spiritually, personally, business-wise? You can go as deep or as shallow as you want.
Yeah, it comes out of what I shared earlier. Some of the best parts are that, I'm sharing the best parts is that I had some victory in my business, and the hard parts is I have to deal with that. The hard part is I have to deal with the man in the mirror. At 57, you got some little boo-boos and aches and pains in your joints, and they are saying things, and then you got a voice in your head telling you only got a certain amount of years left, and so I have to fight that every day. I have to fight that monster, that monkey on my back more than I did when I was younger. Every year, and it seems like this past year in 24, that voice got a little bit louder. And I had to fight it. I had to get out the door and realize I'll take it one day at a time, and I'm not going to join the Who's Through in America. I'm not going to do it. Not yet, you know what I mean? But hey, it wasn't an easy year. It was an extremely challenging year to fight the voice inside my mind telling me to be anxious and fearful about I've said this, and it's every day I work on it, but I don't want to manage an inevitable decline.
Right.
I want my death to be part, interruption to my busy schedule.
Right.
Okay. I don't want to just manage an inevitable decline. And this past year, having to fight back the inevitable decline mentality so that I could go out. When I was younger, I had more just natural energy and maybe hormones, and I was ready to just get in the battle, but still had this same battle here. I mean, I think you guys out there, everyone who's they spell work. Work is a 4-letter word. I mean, sometimes it's tough. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes it's it's tough most of the time. I don't care if you're a musician or whether you like what you do.
Right.
If you're going to make money at it, you gotta. It's tough. So that would be the challenge. The challenge was fighting the anxiety of fear of failure, fear of the inevitable decline, and then what comes after that, which is whatever. If I'm dealing with trouble, it'll come out in my marriage, comes out with my friends, a lot more isolation, depression. Hey, you have to. That was the battle. 24. Dealing with that man in the mirror,
right,
and just the voices saying, you might be through. And I will say this as I close down on that question: is in the church, I was always somebody that was sought after. And then the last 4 or 5 years, I'm not. I'm looked over. I mean, I could get in the parking lot, but I've been looked over, and it's because of my age. And this is what happened with the men when I was younger. The guys that were going into their 60s, you kind of like, you were glad they were there, but you didn't. There's a superstar in his 30s over here, bringing the gospel, and you just look at him, and because he was a little bit, his spring was a little bit, and his step was a little greater, and so that bothers me. That bothered me in 24. That I just don't know that I have a place necessarily in the church, and I feel like God may be leading me to other. Here I sit tonight. It's a Thursday night. I'm with you, Jeshua, and I'm with your audience. I mean, we don't know what that'll mean, but here I am, so, but on a Sunday morning, I get in the parking lot maybe and smile at some people parking, and that bothers me. The pastor's 20 years younger than me, and he wears better clothing. His hairdo is way better. Look at this hair I've got. You know what I mean? But go ahead.
Right.
There's 24.
So, I mean, I know a lot of you guys deal with depression and anxiety and those kind of things. Jim is like a champion for those things. Like, I personally don't really deal with anxiety at this point in my life. And so sometimes the language in those kind of areas is I'm kind of like, I kind of blank out because I'm like, okay, I'm not dealing with those challenges. I know that as I get older, that and I know a lot of my audience are older, and so I know that those challenges are coming, and I can kind of see them in the distance. So if you're dealing with like anxiety or you're dealing with lack of purpose, Jim is your go-to guy, and I will connect you guys if you want his number. He's a very great encourager because he's walked that walk before. And so for me in 2024, I had like 4 major challenges.
All right.
One was just at the commencement of the year, I just didn't have any help. And so I hired this guy named Dayton. He came in the late spring, early summer. And so, just getting him up to speed and getting him to where he was pretty versed in what I do was just a super major challenge. And so, there was a lot of jobs that went sideways because he was doing those jobs and certain, he just had to become acclimated to that very technical work environment. And then it was a very dry season. Like, I don't remember any year being drier than 2024, except I think it was like 7 years ago we did have a dry year. I still don't know that it was as dry as 2024. And you may go look at the weather charts and be like, well, that's not the driest year, but I'm talking about my particular oasis, like right where my shop was located and right where my customers were. It wasn't a busy grass growing season, and a lot of my customers were like landscapers, including Jim. And so my work dried up right away. And so that's what kind of yielded so much travel opportunities for me. I'm like, okay, if I don't have any work, I'm just going to travel. And so, so that was really tough. The April showers did not bring Mayflowers. And then I would say probably the third biggest challenge I had was just significant parts order and logistics.
Okay.
It was awful. The Palmetto, Atlanta USPS distribution center was like the worst shipping center that I've ever dealt with before. Just so many parts that were shipped USPS, Ground Advantage in particular. They just got lost in the mail, or the tracking said it was coming today and then it was a whole week. And so I had all these jobs that were just lined up, and I lost so much money waiting on parts, and it was very frustrating to try to explain to customers, why is this job taking so long? And so it's still a problem even to this day. And so just for your information, guys, USPS Ground Advantage, it doesn't work in rural areas. Maybe in the city. I have a buddy that lives in Brookhaven, and he orders off Amazon, gets it the same day or next day. I'll order off Amazon. It's going to be it's usually about a week. Sometimes I'll get it in 3 days. 3 days is the absolute quickest you can receive it, but oftentimes 3, 4, or 5 days. And so, and then the very last thing, the fourth difficulty I encountered was I had a series of electrical diagnostic repairs that were like state of the art hard. Like, you would never in your lifetime see an electrical problem of this difficulty again. And so I was up past 10 p.m. some nights just trying to diagnose an electrical failure. And so those are, I mean, it was unbelievable. It was some of these electrical problems. It could just be one wire. It could be one chip. It could be one resistor, diode, capacitor, and it can just, you almost pull your hair out before you find out, oh, that's what it is. And so I had a number of those back to back, and it was so draining. So, so that's more like a professional struggle. These were like business oriented struggles, but I had some personal struggles, and I would say those consisted of me basically driving back and forth to Atlanta a lot. And sometimes, Jim was talking about, anxiety, age-related anxiety. Mine is more like feeling empty because I'm not married. Sometimes you feel inadequate. Sometimes and when you're married, you kind of, and you can attest to this, you kind of have someone cracking the whip over your back, get this done, get this done.
Yeah, you have different problems when you're married.
And I would trade his problems for mine,
right?
But
right.
At least I think I will. But
yeah, exactly. There will be times, most of the time, you're right.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so sometimes you just kind of feel like you have no purpose because you're not married and you have no incentive. And so that incentive is what drives you to accomplish. And we're goal-oriented creatures. I think that's one of the greatest drivers of depression or situational depression. If you have like a brain and chemical imbalance, maybe that's different. But if you have like what I call situational depression, where it's a particular situation that kind of induces this negative emotional drain on yourself. For me, it's always because I didn't have any goals. I didn't set any goals, or the goals I've set don't seem to be, I can't bring them to fruition or whatever. And so I'm just kind of sitting at home with nothing to do. Idleness just totally kills my joy. So, and then sometimes I just feel like I'm not doing enough spiritually. I have all these thoughts. I'm like, wow, this is so enlightening, but I don't have anyone to share them with. And then maybe when I do have someone to share it with, I talk straight over them and talk so much to them that they're just like, I am just getting inundated with information. Like, can you stop talking? So I have to be careful, like pace myself and try to get to know them rather than just dumping all of this, social.
Let me plug your podcast. One reason I really seek you out, and I do everything with with a specific intention in mind, and that is I seek you out, is because of what you talked about a minute ago. You have these like real complex wiring situations at work. I mean, you're somebody that when something is very complicated, they bring it to you. And it's good that your audience knows that. I mean, guys, I've known Jess for a long time, and when it gets complicated, I get him involved because it's part of what he does. And he's making a living at it, but it's also shaped a lot of your identity. A lot of who you are is looking at complex things and kind of untangling them, and you're very good at it. And there's a saying that goes like this, first seek to understand before you're understood. And I would agree with you, Joshua. If you'll just, like you said, you're up, till 11 o'clock trying to figure this wiring thing out. You're trying to get more information till 11 o'clock. And one of my issues, too, is I'm willing to talk, but I tend to walk away without more information. I lack some of the information in my relationships because I was so willing to give something, but I didn't get the information. And that is, I want to be a better listener. If you are one of these men that if you, let's say in a scale of, 1 to 10, you're listening. If you'll take 9 out of 10 to listen, you're one of those guys that'll be up at 11 o'clock totally untangling something that is just incredibly hard. You're one of those men that's gifted for that. I know very few people. You're on my speed dial. When things get really tricky, I've got you in the fold. I've got you on the line. And so heads up, guys, it's I've done this for 14 years, I guess you said. And I've got you on that speed dial. If something gets interesting, you're going to have it. So, but all that to say to your audience, this is a blessing to be in here, because this cat right here, he can look at the most complicated things and do something with them. So I don't know where you are, and here he is dealing with the man in the mirror. I guess that might be the hardest thing, is dealing with that guy. So go ahead.
Yeah, life is about self-control, and thank you, Jim, for the compliments. I do feel like I'm wholly inadequate for so many different things. I try to think technical, though. Like I try to divorce the emotional component of myself and try to look at things objectively. And most of the time I don't like what I see. Like even when it comes to diagnostics, even today I had to like redo an entire job because of some type of failure. So I do have this diagnostic mind, but there's just so many things over my head, and every day it's like I'm overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
Jim is really good at encouraging people. So I'm not so much of maybe I am, but I don't call myself the world's greatest encourager. I would say Jim probably is, particularly if you're dealing with like mental issues. I'm like, well, good luck. You're on your own. That's kind of my take on it. But Jim is really good at that. That's his forte. And so,
What you do is you kind of like unfold a map and go, just like you would at work with a schematic. You'll go, all right, I see this and I see that, and we're talking about people issues. And you'll go, I can, back in history, this is what happened, and you kind of look at things in a way where very few people I know do, and it's built into your career, and you're very good at it. And I thank God for it. It has helped me so much to see things I wouldn't see. So keep it up. Yeah. And then you're sober too. You're a man that lives life on life's terms. You're not running down the bottle every night. And if some of your listeners are, no negatives. I mean, maybe that's a coping mechanism, and it works good, so I ain't gonna shoot that down. It just where it drops you off is not so good. So you've been real sober.
Right.
There's another thing I like about you and my friendship with you is you're always sober. You're always dealing with life on life's terms. I can take that. I never question what I'm going to get when I interact with you. And growing up in an alcoholic setting, it was just like one day would be one way, next day another. So I like that. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So we're in 2025, guys. We talked about 2024. What are some things, Jim, that you feel like, okay, these are some failures in my life. These are some lessons I learned in my life. I'm going to apply them in 2025. I'm going to make 2025 the best year yet. What are some things you intend to do better this year? What are some signs of growth in 2025? What are some tools you're going to implement in 2025 just to make this the best possible and most productive year you possibly can?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I've been doing some studies with my son, with Jordan Peterson, and he's kind of categorized some things, that there's sex and then there's power, or the Bible says lust and pride. But over that, he says, is there's sacrifice. And if you sacrifice is over those things. And this year, I want to learn to be a better listener, better giver. I want to learn to, sacrifice seems like a bad word, but it trumps the primal desires that we have. And so in 25, if I have to shoot up, I'm going to shoot up to more of a sacrifice life, because I want the benefit of that. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to just be in this like primal, always it's a lust feeling or power and little pride thing. I want to be in 25. I want to go higher. I want to learn to give more, listen more, be more humble. Try to get mentors in my life, try to listen more, what I share with you. I want to try to, 25, because I'm selfish in some way. I want it to be a great year, and that's why I want to do it. Because I know it's greater to give than to receive. I know it to be true, but it's still doesn't come natural. It's a spiritual principle that, for me, I have to be intentional about. And so I want to be a better giver. I want to really be a giver. I want to, where my sacrifice is where my meaning is, and I want it to grow this year. So I want it to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think it's going to be a great 2025. I do have dating right here from the starting this year, so this kind of takes some of the physicality off of me as I commence this year. I'm trying to pull back just a little bit in my business, and I'm working on entirely new business idea, which I hopefully will reveal soon. So there's a lot of positive signs of economic revival this year. There's a lot of growth on the Lake Oconee area, and so I think some of that may play into perhaps a more busy schedule this year, business-wise. And so, I'm pretty hopeful for this year. I know last year a lot of people were very, very anxious. They held onto their wallets pretty tight. At least my clients did. And so I think people are starting to open up a little bit, and they're realizing that life's got to go on, and they're starting to spend money. And so I think consumer confidence is at an all-time high. And so for me, I just want to start praying more. And my prayer life is not where it ought to be. I need to start reading more. My reading life is not where it ought to be.
Yeah.
And so, and then I want to start fleshing out some ideas to you guys, and just kind of like bring in some of the the 50-year-old advice here. I think older people are awesome. Like they've lived life. Like he's lived longer than Jesus. So I always think about that when you turn like 33, you're like, okay, I'm at the age of Jesus. And then when you get beyond that, you're like, okay, I'm older than he is. So how can you bless the world? How can you be Jesus like as you get older and use your wisdom and understanding that he imparts? Not that we're greater than Jesus, but God has given us this great blessing to be able to be alive on this world each and every day, despite all of the hazards and dangers out there. And so I like having older friends. I like having friends that are busy. I like having friends that are level-headed, and Jim has been that. And so, I want to bring in more people like him into my life and just continue learning as much as I can. And I don't think learning is useful unless you actually implement it, though. So I want to be able to like take these ideas and take them right into the real world and put them and just implement them rather than it just being a bunch of head knowledge, So there's a lot of people out there with a lot of head knowledge. I want to be a doer, not a listener or an accumulator. I don't want to just accumulate knowledge. I don't want to be like a philosopher. I want to show you real world examples, real people who are living this life. He's one man that's on a real road, living a real road, and he's not having corporate come down and tell him what to do. He's one of these kind of people who's facing the customer right in the real world and dealing with it. And so I think when you have like more of a grassroots approach to life like this, then it is what it is. And you're running a business, so you sink or swim. So I like his approach, and we're going to be doing more of these. You guys just stay tuned. And
well, let me throw this. I know you're getting ready to close the back cover of this book, but let me put this out there because this is something that came to me in 24. And it was Patrick Morley who wrote The Man in the Mirror. He wrote another book, Christian Men, something. I don't know the exact title, but we went into the book with my men's group, and one of the topics he brought out, and you made me think of this tonight, Joshua, and I was listening to you. You're in your 40s, and you still got a lot of kick in you. You're ready. Still, bam. A lot of your audience still got a lot of go get them. This is what he said, and I never forgot it. We were sitting there that night, and it said that your work is your ministry. Okay? Your work is your ministry. And he says, because this is where you give your life away. This is about, you spend so much of your time giving yourself to the community, your gifts, your talents. And I literally have shared this. I've shared it today. Every time I run into somebody, you know me like this, but when I run into somebody that seems like their life seems insignificant, their job, I share this point with them, and I want to share it with your audience. You keep mentioning your business because it's really your ministry. If you think about it, you're spending your life there. You mentioned it so much on tonight's show, but it is where you get out of the end of the driveway, and that's where you touch the community. And it is so important. And I think what would happen if the guy who picks up my trash, which he's going to do that tomorrow, he does it first thing in the morning, these trash people. Let's just say they didn't come for 2 months. What does that look like? I mean, I just thank God for the people that get up and do something to bless the community. And so y'all take that. I mean, I share it with people that seem like their job's insignificant. You just say, look, this is your ministry. And people love it. I mean, Jesus came to give his life away. And this is where we're giving our life away. You think that the best 8 hours of your day is given to your job.
Right.
So congrats. And I think you're going to have a great year because here you are mentioning new ideas, new opportunities to go out and serve the community. I got your back, and I think you're going to do great no matter what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think he brings up a valid point about this little lull in our life where it seems like, why am I alive? And I just think about, what was it? From Jesus' age of 13 to 29, what was he doing? I asked someone that the other question. What was Jesus doing from 13 to 29? He was in the temple. I think we kind of read that he was in the temple.
Right.
It's kind of like the last of his childhood we read. And then all the way until he starts his ministry, what was he doing? And I think this lull in his life, and it really wasn't a lull, like he's still the Son of God. He was still doing miracles. He was still doing what no one else can do. When I say doing miracles, I'm not necessarily saying public miracles, but he was still God walking in human flesh, and that's a miracle all by itself. And so he was still perfect, which is a miracle. I think people noticed He's very different. So, but at the same time, I think he went through this regimen that we go through where life is very rhythmic and
Yes.
not very exciting, and we're just doing day after day, and we're completing tasks, and we're doing menial things. And so he went through this as well. And so he was working. He wasn't sitting around fiddling or anything like that or partying. He was actually working. And so I think it's really important if you have this life that's just kind of on repeat. That's kind of how it feels. I'm not saying stay on repeat. You know, at some point he did start his ministry. And so I urge you to, like, if your life just feels like a repeat of yesterday, nothing wrong with that, particularly if you're doing like
That's right.
a necessary job. Now, if your job is not necessary or it's a bad job or it's not helping the community, then get another job. But if your job is wholesome and it's good and it's edifying and it's doing good to community or to God's people, then nothing wrong with rote and rhythm. However, break out of that and go to church and meet people, socialize. Don't be, in too severe of an introvert. But that's kind of what Jim is talking about, just kind of this point in life where it's the same old, same old. That's kind of how it feels. And so anyway, Jim will be on the next podcast as well with me, guys. Just stay tuned. And Jim, would you close us out tonight in prayer?
Oh, that'd be great.
Yes.
That'd be great. Lord, I just thank you for this year that has gone by. We can see the victories as we look back just a short ways behind us. We see that you are carrying us through that year. And Lord, we are anticipating a great year, but Lord, we just thank you for what you're going to do in this new year, 25. Help us to thrive in 25. Help us to not, from your viewpoint, not see someone that is depressed and down and out and unhappy and discouraged. Help us to, Lord, be people that decide to choose to be happy, to choose to be joyful, the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, kindness, patience. Let us have the fruit. Faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Let us have those this year. Let us thrive in those. And I ask that this be the year that people could look back and say, this year, this 25, as we go through this year, that this would be the year that you took the brakes off your life and just let God go ahead and have just all the possibilities. He is a possibility God. And if possibilities thinking or possibilities does not happen to this audience, it wasn't their fault, because after tonight, we are opening our lives for possibilities. So God, go ahead and just do a possibility year in 25 for every one of these people. And Lord, you're a great God, and all things are possible in Christ who gives us strength. Amen.
Amen.